A Creative Thinking Dimension in Architecture and Urban Design Education Programs by Ron Corso and Ross Bater. The project explores the introduction of a program to restructure an undergraduate foundation course in urban design at the University of Adelaide. From experience in educating designers over many years and our own architectural, urban and design practice, we contend that current pedagogical practice is deficient in this field, a view supported by a body of evidence appearing in the literature and from professional bodies in the discipline. To address this situation, we've developed methodologies allowing students to understand and apply basic underlying principles in creative thinking applied to urban design methodology. The process is intended to build a structure and foundation in design thinking for the remainder of the students' degrees of studies and professional life. The inclusion of urban design in past design studies programs within our experience, which embraces architecture and landscape architecture, we felt was a very thin thread woven intimately through the coursework of the two disciplines. The result of this minimal inclusion in the pedagogy of urban design has manifested itself in the profession commenting on the notable deficiencies when assessing for employment of graduating students into the professional urban design practice. The pedagogy of traditional architectural education results in participants having the ability to produce potentially well-designed buildings, but often lacking in consideration to the total involvement of the urban environment, including architecture, landscape architecture and city planning, with respect to cohesion, social, community responsibility and a comprehensive understanding of the city. It was our aim to introduce a more comprehensive approach to the study of urban design that went beyond the mere design of buildings and spaces in isolation to the many other interconnected relationships that create a more realistic context for understanding urban design. Our intention was to make students aware that urban design is not only the physicality of a city, but the manifestation of many social, cultural, functional, cross-discipline and infrastructure influences. The program of study was presented in 4 parts. There was an element of observation, analysis, through drawing, etc., documentation, and then design and reflection. Each weekly session comprised an illustrated lecture and tutorial introducing concepts in urban design, ways of working creatively, and methods of visual communication which the students were then required to apply to the studio team city project. We involved the students in the following stages, creating a structure that we saw as providing the crucial underlying methodological principles that students needed to learn, understand and apply in order to establish the foundations to comprehend and practice urban design. The project encompassed a sector of the City of Adelaide covering 17 blocks. Students were allocated a block on the Adelaide ornithological grid comprising built form, streets, open space and city squares. Students made observations through a variety of direct sensory experiences exploring qualities and functions of the built environment. We wanted to create an awareness and a sensitivity expressed in personal attitudes and values about how place and space affects the way we function physically and emotionally. Through this approach, we wanted students to enhance their skills in observation, analysis, reflection and visual communication methods, including quick hand sketching and journal documentation. Teams in open forums discuss their findings from determining a structure of what effective observation means and can achieve to written, visual and audio methods leading to responses, reflections, communicating and sharing with others. As an example, discussions focused on greater detail such as why spaces like streets are the way they are. What in fact are they? How do they function? What influence and control do they have and in turn are influenced by things such as buildings, spaces, people, both within and beyond the particular precinct. Processes such as historical context was looked at, how things evolved. All of which in turn demonstrated a more insightful involvement in the work through the interactive nature of the tutorials. Subsequent analysis demonstrated knowledge of factors that make environments responsive, like human scale, variety, resilience, legibility, permeability and personalisation. This developed an understanding of the relationships between people, places and activities, enhancing the students' abilities to interpret and critically analyse information in terms of place as opposed to space, and to speculate about change whereby the identification of problems, finding alternatives and making informed decisions emerged, as well as the means of presenting and communicating ideas. Students were encouraged to document all observations, make comments and reflect in the process of evolving concepts and ideas using creative thinking methods that relied on exploration and speculation of possibilities within self-established, well-informed research frameworks. The journal was intended to be an inquiring process where questions were posed dealing with issues such as what is the city and how do things work within it? What are the elements of the city? How do these city elements integrate and relate to each other? What is the functionality of the elements? How do buildings relate to streets and open space? What are the quality of these spaces? Who uses these spaces? Are they shared or dedicated for people and vehicles? What are the moods, atmosphere and environment of these places? What is there to be observed above and below eye level, for example? These fundamental questions laid the groundwork for the studio project. In order to answer these questions, students were asked rhetorically another set of probing and inquiring questions, refining the observational grain of their work to further enhance their understanding of the city. These questions covered design detail considerations such as functional interface, environment and climatic factors, importance of a sense of place, sustainability, communication, sensory awareness, smell, audible, etc. As well, we wanted students to consider the notion of a sense of change over time, future opportunities, heritage and history awareness and issues, permanent and temporary considerations, ownership issues, public and private spaces, pedestrian movement, vehicular movement, public-private transport, land use and functionality, landscaping, water-sensitive urban design, green philosophies, time zone awareness, for example, night, day, seasonal, peak, climate, etc. Students began to think beyond the topic, and the creative thinking input worked in tandem to facilitate meaningful observation, identifying issues, adapting to changing situations, being able to see connections between things, and to create new and innovative ideas, changes, and ways of communicating these. Students began to question much more, looking for differences and alternatives beyond obvious or expected scenario. Our methodologies promoted concepts such as risk-taking, learning from mistakes, speculative, exploratory and investigative modes of learning, where fluency and flexibility in terms of generating ideas was encouraged. We introduced chance and random input, withholding judgment, sense, ambiguous, metaphorical, analogous thinking, structuring the curriculum to facilitate the challenging of assumptions about much in the built environment that is taken for granted and accepted unquestionably. Creative thinking methodologies such as challenging assumptions help to break patterns of behaviour and thinking about why we should always accept the expected ways of doing things. This deliberate, provocative methodology enables us to look at things in novel ways for the sake of just seeing where it might lead. We encourage the students to use methods such as deconstructing a problem, breaking it down to its component parts, and coming up with solutions to the individual small bits of the problem, then reconstructing the bits to give new possibilities from unexpected combinations. We also explored aspects such as random association or random input, relying on the human compulsion to make connections between things, even when they are not apparently obvious. To exploit this characteristic, we introduce students to a given problem with seemingly unrelated inputs like words, products, mediums, etc., and use these to spark new ideas. The aim of these methods was to push the unexpected, to introduce ways of working that would break the tendency to come up with an immediate solution that is able to meet all the complex requirements and aspects of a problem. We introduced journals to the students to encourage personal expression on the part of each of the students' work to reflect and document a range of material, aiding in the observation, analysis and design requirements that we had set. We saw journals as important in assisting students to take some control over their learning, by making significant decisions, many as a group, in the way they responded to set assignments and tasks, rather than the process being entirely teacher-centred and driven. Valuable dialogue was established between students and lecturers, where students gathered information, explored ideas in an experimental risk-taking mode, and expressed how they thought and felt through engaging in the process of working things out. We were encouraging students to be independent learners, to reflect and in turn increase their knowledge and understanding of urban design through the process of imagination and visualisation. In their journals, students were encouraged to document all observations, make comments, and reflect in the process of evolving concepts and ideas using creative thinking methods that relied on exploration and speculation of possibilities within self-established, well-informed research frameworks. Teams in open forums discuss their findings, from determining a structure of what effective observation means and can achieve, to written, visual and audio methods leading to responses, reflections, communicating and sharing with others. Student comments, both formal through student evaluation of learning and teaching formats, and in focus groups, provided positive feedback in terms of the experience, challenging them, unlocking their mind, thinking outside the box, and providing a cooperative, interactive, student-centred way of working, promoting independent learning in an attempt to model a real-life experience. In summary, the work has challenged our thoughts on urban design educational practice, allowing us to trial approaches that provide a basic structure for students to understand underlying principles in the discipline, building on these and applying them creatively in various and changing situations in their future practice. We have challenged past practice in urban design education that others have described as lacking structure to teach creativity and tending to deal with superficial aesthetics of physical form, usually as an extension of or under the umbrella of architecture, often characterised by an exaggerated emphasis on an end product. The result, both in the form of student work that we have formally evaluated and the extensive feedback from students and colleagues teaching these same students in other courses, where the impact of our approach has been noticed, has given us encouragement that the course is making a difference.